Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the very small and impressive catalogue from Norwegian guitarist, bandleader and composer Lage Lund. So ever since bursting onto the scene in the 2000s, Lage Lund has played and collaborated with a number of different artists, from Seamus Blake to Zach Brock to Orlando Lee Fleming to Jimmy Green to Ingrid Jensen to Carmen Lundy to Michael Rosen to David Sanchez to Maria Schneider to Leo Sidran to Melissa Aldana to Matt Brewer, to name a few. And when you hear Lage Lund, you know straight away who it is, as he has a very distinct sound on the guitar, which is very similar to the legendary Pat Metheny. But by no means, Lage Lund is far from a copycat. He's very much his own man with his own unique identity. And Lage Lund has been a long-time favourite of mine for many years. He's one of the best guitarists on the scene today. And for today's edition, I am going to be taking a look at the very small catalogue of Lage Lund, which consists of 6 studio recordings that he has released under his name as a band leader for the Crisscross Jazz label. And as always, I'm going to be talking about each album individually and choosing which one I think is the best one. Not an easy challenge when you've got such a small catalogue of albums, but each one of these albums is fantastic. They're all different. They all showcase Lage Lund's guitar playing, and he's featured in a variety of different settings. And what I've always liked about Lage Lund is he's always reinventing himself and he's always refining his sound. So when you hear the first album and then you listen to his newest album, he sounds completely different. And that to me is what sets him apart from a lot of guitarists on the scene today. There's only a select few that I can think of who have reinvented themselves and sound totally different to when they first started. And that's Julian Lage, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Radko Jaka, and Lage Lund, and Adam Rogers as well. There's only like a select few I can think of in the more recent years who have been able to completely transform their sound and style of playing. So we're going to start with the first album, which came out in 2008. And this one is a very hard one to find, but if you can find it, it's a very good one. Early Songs. So this is Lage Lund's first album for the Crisscross Jazz label, and this features Lage Lund in a quintet setting. Now, the interesting thing about Lage Lund is with this album, this is the only album that Lage Lund has recorded as a band leader to feature saxophone. Now, bear in mind that Lage Lund has played with a number of different sax players, as I mentioned already, like David Sanchez and Seamus Blake. But as far as his own albums are concerned, he's only recorded with one sax player. And this to me really stands out on its own. It's a very good album. It's got a mixture of originals and some standards. And even though this is Lage Lund's album, this is very much a band effort and it's really good. And it's very similar to the style of sound that Pat Metheny and Michael Brecker had when they were playing together for many years. And to me, it's a fantastic album. Not an easy one to find, but at the same time, very enjoyable. So the band featured on here is, of course, Lage Lund on guitar, Marcus Strickland on tenor and soprano sax. Unbelievable sax player. Highly recommend you check him out. He's phenomenal. And we've got Daniel Grissett on piano, Orlando Lee Fleming on bass, remarkable bass player. He's played with everyone. And we've got Kendrick Scott on drums. So we've got a bit of a little supergroup here. So a bit of an all-star quintet here. So the tracks we got here are Scrapyard Orchestra, Poppy, You Do Something to Me, Voingut, Around the World in a Bottle, Quiet Now, Ciela, and the incredibly profound song. So it's kind of a mixture of compositions as I said, some originals by Lageland and some standards as well. So let's have a look. So there is the cover, and some liner notes here about Lageland's background. And we've also got a full breakdown of each composition. And some more breakdowns of the compositions as well. And we got some more breakdowns of the compositions. But a remarkable debut album for Lageland, and this album pretty much sets the tone for what Lageland is going to be all about. So most of the compositions are written and composed by Lageland, with the exception of a couple of standards. But a good start, and Lageland pretty much puts everyone on notice that he's the new boy and he's ready to make a huge impact. And with this album, he certainly achieved that. And as I said, this album, not an easy one to find, but if you can find it, it's very enjoyable and highly recommended. So standout tracks for me are Scrapyard Orchestra, Around the World in a Bottle, the incredibly profound song, and Poppy. But the whole album from start to finish is really good. I listened to this a while ago, just before Christmas, and I forgot how good this album is. And I'm very surprised that Lageland hasn't made more albums with sax players in his band. He works very well with sax players, depending on who the sax player is, of course. But I think Lageland and Marcus Strickland work very well together. They make a great front line. Orlando Lee Fleming, very solid and reliable bass player and an unbelievable player. Kendrick Scott, great drumming from him and great piano playing from Daniel Grisette as well. So an all-star band, no weak links here, and very much Lageland's show, but at the same time, it's still very much a band effort. So there you have it, Lageland early songs, an excellent debut, and one that would pretty much set the tone for what Lageland is going to be all about. Fantastic stuff. So we move on to the next album, which came out in 2010, and this is a quartet effort, Unlikely Stories. So, whereas the first album was more of a quintet effort, we see Lageland switch gears here, and now he's gone into a more quartet setting. So, the saxophone is gone, so we now have a guitar, piano, bass, drum format, and the lineup has changed here. And once again, an all-star lineup. So we've got here Lageland on guitar, Ed Simon on piano, Ben Street on bass, and the legendary Bill Stewart on drums. So just like the first album featured an all-star lineup, for Lageland's follow-up, we get an all-star lineup here once again. Now this album, very enjoyable. I think with the lack of a horn player and a pianist, so you got more of a quartet format. I think this is where Lageland really shines brightly. His guitar playing is more front and center, but there's still plenty of space for all of the individual players to breathe and do their thing. And when you've got a guy like Bill Stewart on drums, you're going to sound good because Bill Stewart is one of those special drummers. He can make everyone sound good, and he does that here once again. And when you've got Ben Street, a great bass player, Ed Simon, a tremendous pianist, you can't go wrong really. Now, unlike Lageland's debut album, Unlikely Stories is all originals, so there's no standards whatsoever. So this, to me, shows that Lageland has become a little bit more confident as a composer. So he's taking more risks and going for more original compositions as opposed to the first album, whereas it was a mixture of originals and standards. So Nice change of pace here. So we've got Swagger, Folly, Worms, 12 Beats, Truck Stop Queen, Drum, Life at the Bottom of a Lake, and What We See. So great collection of songs here. And Lageland, he just sounds amazing as always. Bill Stewart, what more can you say? One of the greatest drummers of all time. Ben Street, rock solid bass playing, and Ed Simon, an amazing piano player who's quite a big man on his own, in his own right as a band leader. So let's have a look. So got the liner notes here about the second album. Just like the first album, we got a full breakdown of the compositions individually. And more breakdown of the compositions. And just like before, full breakdown of the compositions. So tremendous album and a great follow-up to his debut recording, Early Songs. So standout tracks for me are What We See, Drum, 12 Beats, Swagger, and Folly. But an excellent album and a great follow-up to his debut recording. Lageland, as I said at the beginning, when you listen to the first album and then you get to the second and you get all the way to his newest one, he sounds completely different. So you can hear on the second album, Unlikely Stories, you can really hear Lageland's guitar playing really starts to evolve and grow. And he doesn't sound quite the same as he did on the first album, but you can still hear it's very much him. So, I get the sense that with Lageland, he's more or less trying to find his feet and he's more or less trying to find his voice, but he kind of does have his identity already, but he's still trying to find his place. But yeah, it's very enjoyable, this album. And as I said, not saying that he doesn't sound great with sax players. He did on the first album, but as I said before, I think it really depends on who he works with. But in this environment, guitar, piano, bass, and drums, you can't go wrong really. And this is a setting that he really excels himself in. So there you have it. Unlikely Stories. Excellent follow up to Early Songs. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next one, which came out in 2013, and this is still very much a quartet effort, and it's a continuation of Unlikely Stories, Foolhardy. So Lageland has pretty much near enough kept the same lineup as the last album, Unlikely Stories, but Ed Simon is gone, and in his place is the remarkable pianist Aaron Parks. Aaron Parks, for me, is one of the best pianists in the world today and a very highly regarded individual in his own right. He's done a lot of albums under his name, and he's pretty much seen it all and done it all. So to have Aaron Parks in this environment is kind of a big deal, and he's an amazing pianist. So Ben Street and Bill Stewart return as rhythm section from Unlikely Stories, Aaron Parks on piano, and of course Lageland on guitar. So as I said before, this is an environment I feel that Lageland thrives on. You know, guitar, piano, bass, and drums. As I said before, lots of space for all the individuals to breathe and improvise and do their thing. And it's a great follow up to Unlikely Stories. Again, more original compositions. There are a couple of standards thrown in, but this is a fantastic album and a great follow up to Unlikely Stories. So, tracks we got here are Tokyo, That It Then, the title track Foolhardy, Unanswered Call of the Wild, Slow Crow, Old Horsey, Holiday for Strings, Keystone, All or Nothing at All. Great collection of material, some original compositions by Lageland, and as I said, there's a few standards as well. So let's have a look. So just like always, there's some liner notes about how this project came together, and we've also got a breakdown of the compositions and a little bit of information about the individuals who play on this album, and just more or less a breakdown of each composition individually, and as well more a breakdown of the compositions as well, and the same here as well. So great follow up, unbelievable guitar playing as you'd expect from Lageland. Aaron Parks, the guy is just an absolute phenom on the piano. He just sounds incredible. Ben Street, rock solid bass player. And Bill Stewart, what more can you say that hasn't been said already? The guy's a legend. The guy on the drum kit, he can make anything and everyone sound great. And he does this once again. So it's nice to see Bill Stewart's back behind the drum kit with Lageland. And he works very well with guitarists. And, his collaborations with John Scofield and Pat Metheny is just legendary. He works very well with guitarists, and we get to see that here again with him. And he can make any guitarist sound good, and he does exactly that with Lageland. It's just a remarkable album. So the standout tracks for me are Tokyo, the title track Foolhardy, Unanswered Call of the Wild, Old Horsey, and That's It Then. But great album. Again, quite an easy album to find. Some of these albums are quite rare, especially the first one, but highly recommend this one is worth checking out. This is a really good album. If you're into more guitar, piano, bass, drums, quartet formats, this is the perfect place to start with. It's a really good album, and Lageland, he just continues to keep getting better and better, and he's more or less finding his footing here. It's more or less finding his voice. And as I said, with each of these albums, they all sound different, and his guitar playing continues to evolve. So there you have it. Foolhardy, excellent album, and a great continuation to Unlikely Stories. Tremendous stuff. So we move on to the next one, and this one came out in 2015, and it's a trio recording, Ideal Wild. So after two quartet recordings and a quintet recording, we see Lageland completely strip things down to a trio. And for me, this was the album that I was waiting for and hoping for. As much as I love Lageland in the quartet and the quintet settings, for me, this is where I feel that Lageland's voice really speaks the loudest to me and very clearly. And I think this is the perfect format to showcase his great guitar playing. So he's retained the rhythm section of bassist Ben Street and drummer Bill Stewart. And this is a remarkable album. And as I said, this was one that I was waiting for. And, he came through, and this trio recording really delivers. And Bill Stewart, I've said this before in past reviews. Trio is where Bill Stewart is at his very best. If you look at his pedigree, the bulk of his work is trio, and for me, this is a setting that he thrives in. Ben Street, again, he thrives in everything, but I feel this is a setting he really is at his very best. And Lageland, I feel this is where he's finally found his voice. This is where he really gets to shine the brightest, and it's a remarkable album, and lots of space for improvisation and everybody to do their thing, and it's a really good album. So more original compositions here, a couple of standards thrown in as well, but this is great stuff here. So we got Rumspringa, Intro to Rain, Come Rain or Come Shine, So in Love, Isn't This My Sound Around Me, Mirrors, Just One of Those Things, Intro to Chance, Chance, Good Morning Heartache, Straight Street, and the title track. Ideal Wild. Excellent album. And as I said, this was one that I was really hoping he would get round to making, and he finally did, and he didn't disappoint. So let's have a look, shall we? So, just as always with Criss Cross albums, you get a little bit of a backstory, how this project came together, and a little bit about the individuals and a breakdown of the compositions as well. More of a breakdown of the compositions, and same here again as well. A little bit of a breakdown of the compositions, and then some nice little words about the trio combo of Lund, Street, and Stewart. Tremendous stuff here. So the standout tracks for me are Intro to Rain, Mirrors, Just One of Those Things, Intro to Chance, Straight Street, and the title track Ideal Wild. But all of this album from start to finish is excellent. And as I said, as much as I love the quartet stuff and quintet projects, this is the environment that I feel Lageland really shines. And out of this entire catalogue, this is the only trio recording that he has released for Criss Cross. So I'm hoping in the near future, Lageland will go back to the trio environment and do some more. And I hope he keeps these guys, because Ben Street and Bill Stewart make an amazing rhythm section. And, if you're a bass player and you need a dance partner in terms of drummers, there's no better dance partner to have in this environment than Bill Stewart. He's the man, and this is an environment I feel he really shines the brightest in terms of his drumming. And Lageland, great guitar playing, bit more of a laid back approach as opposed to the first three albums, but tremendous stuff here. And again, his guitar playing continues to grow and evolve. So this is a really good album. And if you're looking to get into Lageland stuff, and if I was to recommend only one album from his catalogue, it would definitely be the Trio album. This is tremendous stuff here. So there you have it. Ideal Wild, highly recommended, and a great trio recording. And sadly, the only trio recording in this catalogue. Brilliant stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2019. And this sees Lageland kind of going back to his roots somewhat, and we see him return to the quartet format once again. And this one is called Terrible Animals. So the first Lageland album was a quintet project, and then the next two albums were quartet efforts, and then the next album after was a trio recording. So we see Lageland return to this environment once again, but with an added twist. We see Lageland using more guitar synths and effects, so we get to see him coming up with a much more deeper and thicker sound. So it really helps to beef up the quartet in a big way. And it's an all-star band. So we've got Lageland on guitar and effects, Sullivan Fortner on piano, the legendary Larry Grenadier on bass, and we've also got renowned Tyshawn Sorey on drums, who is best known for his current long association with pianist Vijay Iyer. And Larry Grenadier, of course, is best known for his current ongoing long association with pianist Brad Mildoo. So, bit of an all-star band here. So we've got an amazing rhythm section, Larry Grenadier and Tyshawn Sorey, and we've got Sullivan Fortner, who's kind of like the lesser known of this band, but a tremendous pianist. And with this album, Terrible Animals, all original compositions. So you're starting to see the confidence growing more with Lageland. Whereas some of his albums, there's some standards and some originals. Here, it's all originals, and you really get to see how much Lageland has grown and evolved, not just as a guitar player, but as a composer as well. So tracks we got here are Hard Eights, Aquanauts, Superations, Haitian Ballad, Ray Ray, Octoberry, Brasilia, Take It EAS, the title track, Terrible Animals, We Are There Yet. So great album and a little bit different compared to the other albums. Bit more experimental, bit more on the improvisational side, but that's not a bad thing, you know, because as I said, Lageland is all about taking risks and trying out new things. And you know what? It works. And you know, you really see how much he's changed from being a straight ahead guitarist to a much more adventurous guitarist. So let's have a look. So just like always with the Criss Cross albums, a little bit of an insight how this project came together and a breakdown of the compositions and a little bit about the individuals who play on this album. More of a continuation of the breakdown of compositions as well here. Breakdown of these compositions and the same here as well, and a few words about Lageland the man. But great album here. As I said, it's not really what you would call your traditional quartet album. I listened to this recently, and some of it did remind me of Pat Metheny because you know he's done many albums like this in this environment, and there were some similarities. I thought, it sounds like PMG or a Pat Metheny album, but it doesn't try to emulate what Pat Metheny does. You know, Lageland comes up with his own ideas and his own identity, and as I said, it works very, very well. And it's a tremendous album. As I said, a bit more on the experimental side as opposed to the earlier, bit more laid back stuff. But at the same time, this is a guy who is only going forward, and he's not just going back to his roots. He's more or less improving on what he's done already. So he's kind of looked at like, well, I've done this already, but let's see what else I can do with it. Maybe I can take it to another level or go in a different direction. So standout tracks for me are Hard Eights, Suppressions, Ray Ray, Octoberry, Brasilia, the title track Terrible Animals, and We Are There Yet. A great collection of songs, and once again, Lageland comes through with another very strong album and highly recommended if you like that sort of fast paced, more experimental kind of music. This is definitely an album worth checking out. So there you have it. Terrible Animals. Excellent stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2023, and it's more or less a continuation of Terrible Animals. Most Peculiar. So this sees Lageland retain the quartet, guitar, piano, bass, and drums. So Larry Grenadier is gone, and Matt Brewer is in his place now. And Matt Brewer, an amazing bass player, and he's played with just about everyone, especially on the Criss Cross jazz label. So Sullivan Fortner is back on piano, and Tyshawn Sorey is back on drums, and Lageland, of course, on guitars, effects, and guitar synth. Excellent follow up to Terrible Animals, and once again, just like Terrible Animals, all original compositions by Lageland. So you're really starting to see Lageland come into his own, not just as a guitar player, but as a band leader and as a composer. And the material that he comes up for the guys here is just absolutely amazing. So we've got Cigarettes, Trees, Circus Island, Warsaw, Elephants, Stone Age, Lost in Your Hometown, Antarctica, Bad Acrobat, and Horses. Great, great album this is. And I would say with Terrible Animals and Most Peculiar, definitely more heavy, experimental, and a lot more on the improvisational side, but highly enjoyable nonetheless. So let's have a look. So just like as always with Criss Cross albums, you get a little bit of an insight into how this project came together and a little bit about the individual musicians who play on this album. And we also get a breakdown of each composition individually, how it came about, and how Lageland came up with the names of the material, and how each musician plays on each track individually. And also here, just like before, just continuation and breakdown of each composition, and the same here as well. So it's just like a little bit of information about what each track is all about. But this is a really good album. As I said, with Terrible Animals and Most Peculiar, it's definitely in that sort of Pat Metheny sort of style of music. But as I said, Lageland isn't trying to like copy Pat Metheny. Obviously, there's some Pat Metheny influence in there, but he kind of like takes some ideas and puts his own spin on things. And for the most part, it works very, very well. And he's very much his own man, his own unique voice. So when you look at early songs, Lageland's debut album, and you come all the way to this album, Most Peculiar, you can see how much Lageland has changed and evolved as a guitar player and composer. And Matt Brewer, one of the best bass players in the world, he sounds amazing as always. Tyshawn Sorey, a powerhouse behind the drums, but an amazing player nonetheless. And Sullivan Faulkner, a very classy piano player who brings a lot of elegance solos to this band. And Lageland, he just sounds like an absolute beast on the guitar, and he just sounds amazing as always. So the standout tracks for me are Cigarettes, Circus Island, Warsaw, Elephants, Lost in Your Hometown, Antarctica, and Horses. But a really good collection of songs from start to finish, and very enjoyable as well, and highly recommended if you're looking to get into more of Lageland's recent albums. This is definitely a good place to start. In fact, all of these albums are worth checking out, I would say. They're all good and they're all different, but very enjoyable nonetheless. So there you have it. Most Peculiar, excellent album. So, which Lageland album out of all six do I think is the best one? Well, they're all good, they're all different. Obviously, some are better than others, but I think any one of these albums could easily be a favourite. But I have to choose one, and I'm definitely going with the trio recording, Ideal Wild. I think this is Lageland's best album. This is one where he really excels as a guitar player, and I think this is an environment where he is at his absolute best, and this is where his voice really speaks to me the clearest. And I just think this is where he needs to be. Guitar, bass, and drums. This is where his guitar playing is showcased and it's front and center. And you've got Ben Street and Bill Stewart, so you can't really go wrong with those guys as your rhythm section. But Ideal Wild is my favourite Lageland album, and it's the only trio album that he has recorded for Criss Cross Jazz. So hopefully we'll see him make another trio recording in the near future. So there you have it. Ideal Wild by Lageland's Trio, my favourite album out of all six. But that's not to take anything away from the other albums. They're all good, but I just happen to like this one just a little bit more. I think this one really spoke to me the loudest and the clearest. So there you have it. Lageland, Ideal Wild, my favourite Lageland recording out of his entire catalogue. An excellent album and highly recommended. In fact, I would highly recommend his entire catalogue to anyone who's looking to get into guitar playing or if you're just a guitar fan in general. So there you have it. Ideal Wild, brilliant album. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite Lageland album? Is it Early Songs, Unlikely Stories, Foolhardy, Ideal Wild, Terrible Animals, or Most Peculiar? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite albums. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.